And so you have people on two extremes. One that's not willing to pay for anything and want it done, as quick as possible. You have other people that are willing to pay for it. So as long as it's a great experience. And I think leaning into that, particularly in the upper end, the luxury space, like that is going to be a world where like more value and articulating your value becomes more prevailing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Real Estate Show. I'm Tiffany Weber, a real estate attorney in Mooresville, North Carolina, with another office in Huntersville, North Carolina. And today I am so excited about the guest that is joining us. We have Mike Hagee. Welcome, welcome. I've had the privilege of knowing you in random contexts for a couple of years now. And it's really nice when our paths get to cross about our careers and the things that we do daily.
Totally.
So if you will do me a favor and tell everybody listening a little bit about you, what areas you serve, and how did you get here? Because it's not the traditional way.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you guys for the invite. I love the work you're doing out there.
Oh, thank you.
Please like, follow, and subscribe. This channel is
Oh
incredible.
my gosh. Yeah.
I have to put it out there because I really love watching the content. I've seen you grow and what you guys have done. It's really incredible.
Thank you.
So again, thanks for the invite. Mike Hagee, I'm a local real estate agent of almost 19 years. I guess that means that after 4 kids and a lot of gray hairs that I've been around the block.
Yeah.
And the traditional route was not my entry into real estate, if you will. I was a ER nurse prior to real estate. And so I worked in the hospital and kind of got tired of the night routine, which was 7P to 7A. And being in that world is fast moving, really dealing with true life and death on the daily. I think
Extreme
your adrenal glands like get worn out to the point that you're like, for many reasons, you want to help people in that capacity, hence why you get into that field. But I think it evolves into, do you see yourself doing this for the next 20 years? I think for me, I didn't see that, but I had a friend in real estate and real estate investing specifically. And I thought, well, you know what? This looks fun. Like, how hard could it be? That's it's probably the same thing with any CrossFit workout. You see it 8 minute, and you're like, oh, that's going to be so easy.
Yes.
And then you're like dying a slow death, And so with real estate, I kind of shifted from doing nursing. I was still doing it for a while and doing real estate. I remember going 40 hours a week at the hospital, picking up extra shifts to going right into the real estate office. I was really fortunate that...
Did you ever sleep?
I don't think I slept at all. No,
Yeah.
I just it was 80, 100 hours a week. And I was trying to soak up as much as I could. Because in nursing school and like any traditional school, you're taking notes, you're learning, and then you're practicing. There's a practical application. So in real estate, I feel like the best is not the classroom learning per se. You have to have it so you don't get sued, you get a license. But beyond that, you're like, well, how do I build a business? How do I connect with people? What are those interpersonal skills that I need? How do I set up a client party? You're not learning that in school.
Yeah, I feel the same way about law in that we would be much better served by apprenticeships being part of the education and a requirement before you could get licensed.
Totally.
Yeah, maybe same thing.
Maybe we can put that out there as leveling up, right?
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate to have a mentor in the business. Scott Pridemore is my business partner today. But back then, he was my mentor, a single agent with one assistant. And he grew, had the best year ever in 2008, created his company. And I said, hey, I want to be around you. I want to be around the success. And I think that's true. The best agents want to be around other successful agents. They say eagles fly with eagles, not gimpy turkeys.
Yeah. And you saying 2008, what you didn't say in what is very apparent is that this is somebody that recognizes opportunities, even when things are not good, is finding a way to make it happen. Ooh. So if I was you in that same situation, I would have done the same thing. I got to figure out what this guy's doing.
I got to figure out what's going on. Yeah. And during that time, there's other things that happened. I went through a divorce, had some really dark times. And so he helped me find my way through that and then come on the other side. And, you learn some things about yourself when you kind of have hard times. And so if somebody that's been through fire, but comes out and continues to forge ahead, I see a little myself in their story in that way. And so that comeback, that resilience, and that's true of any business owner that has been through challenging times. If there's lean times, you figure a way through it. And if there's hardy times, you save for a rainy day and everything in between. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Now, I don't want to focus too much on your past career, but I do think it's interesting that nursing is a highly skilled profession. So there's a lot of things that you learned and a lot of experience you had that I'm sure people might be surprised translate into real estate. So can you think of anything that like you learned and honed as a nurse that like still serves you today?
Absolutely. I think the fundamental premise of nursing is you're taking care of people in their probably the worst hour at scale. And so you have to do it in a really efficient way. Yeah. And then you have to do it in a way that the patient feels like you're really taking care of them, in the sense that your empathy is your EQ and your empathy meter is so high. So that translates into real estate, because people are taking care of one of their largest financial purchases or acquisitions. And if you can like make sure that people really feel, and it's true because that's who you are, that I feel like I want you to have a successful experience, then I think that that's the piece that it ranks really high. There's some tactical things too. If you can learn how to put an IV in and take blood pressure that you can barely register, and like you're really intently listening. I have a hearing impediment, so like this is not a nursing skill, but in general, I have to work that much harder to really listen. Yeah. And there's some reflective listening skills that come from in nursing that you can translate into real estate by just simply listening. I think that's where God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Right? I'm pretty good at the middle one, but like
same.
But Tiffany, if I can get better at like asking questions and listening and really understanding where another person's perspective is, that's a really helpful skill in the real estate space.
Yeah, I like that. And one of my motives for asking that question is I'm not a first career lawyer. I did something else first. And it intrigues me so much about people that make a career change, how much almost more easily they get settled in their new career because of the trials they had in their first one. Ooh. So, it was like, I can't miss this opportunity to ask you, like, what did you pull from that? Question. And you answered it in a way that I'm like, okay, it's even better than I thought it was going to be. So,
that's awesome.
Because what you did was just so high pressure and high stress. And not to say real estate isn't stressful. It absolutely is. And it can be very, very stressful. But you also have some perspective on it, because ER, like you said, true life and death. You're facing, the worst times. Whereas real estate is stressful, but again, death is not going to be one of the options in the transaction.
The thermal window seal that happens to be cracked, it's not high on the like life scale.
Yeah, it's close or not close, not live or die.
Exactly.
So, kind of switching gears a little bit, you've seen some stuff over 19 years.
Oh yeah.
So you've probably got some crazy stories. And, when we have agents on, we like to ask, because it's kind of fun to a little bit commiserate on the crazy stuff.
For sure.
What's your wildest real estate story?
Oh, I love this question. There's so many great ones to pull from in a world that is chaotic and unpredictable, and you're dealing with other people that that you're in that world. I think there was a time going back to when things were challenging, you figure a way through it. And kind of like attracting yourself around that environment. And at the time, we were doing a lot of short sales and the foreclosure world. And that was a time where we represented a few banks. We would list their properties. And in that space, you would learn pretty quickly, like, how to do a BPO and how to do all these
OREO means something completely different.
It was totally different than what we did before. We haven't really done it since coming out of that time period. But that was a moment in time, an inflection point of like pivoting, figuring a way through it, and ultimately, finding, working your way through it. And so there was a property once in that space that was bank owned that you would check on these properties. You were required to give these updates. But once you had a listing sign on the ground, and sometimes these things would sit during that time period and weren't flying off the shelf, you'd have like this vacant property that again, you were required to go check in on, but it wasn't like every day you're going by this property. So I got a call from a neighbor, and they said, you guys really need to cut the grass. And I said, oh, okay, well, thank you so much. You must have had some heavy rain. We'll get on that. And so it was maybe like 2 or 3 weeks. It would kind of passed. But during that time period, what we discovered is that somebody had ran a fictitious Craigslist ad using our listing, taken the listing sign and lockbox down, had a locksmith and changed out all the locks, and ultimately had moved in a person that was not supposed to be there. So it wasn't just squatting. It was like a full out fictitious fraudulent lease with a deposit, allegedly a deposit. And so when I got there to examine the property, I realized like okay, this is not just the grass is not cut. There's like trash in the yard. There's like clearly the lights are on. How did they even get the lights on?
Yeah.
At the power company, I assume they just let that roll on. So bottom line is we got there, and unfortunately it was a single mom with 3 kids, and the person on Craigslist had advertised it as such a low rent. And we were asking the lady, like, did you think about this? Like, in a world where it's typically $2,000 a month, this was like $800 a month. Like, did you think that was low or something strange? She's like, I just needed a place for my family. Yeah. So it really pulled at the heartstrings because like I'm seeing this go on and I didn't know who was there or not. So ultimately we had the police come because we didn't know if this person wasn't clearly supposed to be here. I ended up helping that person transition to another home, and we found like a partnership with a crisis ministry that could kind of help her. Yeah. But I said, well, how is this all going to play out? Like, how did he get the money? It was in cash. Yeah.
Oh,
it was like in signature, and the guy was going to come around once a month during this time period, and she had to have the cash ready. And it was basically, they had devised this whole thing. And the payoff was what? To take over a property and get like a very little deposit, very little monthly rent, but to that, guy. And I hope they caught him, but we ended up shutting all that down. But it was just crazy because one minute it's just a listing for the bank. The next minute is like, no, there's like literally someone living here.
That is insane.
It's kind of wild.
Yeah. And it's, I feel like someone running that kind of scam has to know that the gig is going to be up soon.
It has to.
So it's a quick cash grab, and that they don't think about the collateral damage. You've got 3 children that need a place, need a roof over their heads. And it also speaks to you as a person that, you had an obligation to your client, but you saw the situation and you're like, I can't not do something.
I had to. It was like, this is way too it was very emotional for her because she's in shock. Like,
and she was tricked.
My home. She was literally starting to paint one of the rooms like a kid's color and like, it was like,
gosh.
And the bank's like, we want her out, like cash for fees, like during that time period was just like, and so we had to alert them what was going on. But it made me feel good, even despite that kind of really hard situation, was like to help her transition to another place. And, it was just kind of one of those things you realize like, wow, anything can happen in this world.
And there's some bad dudes out there.
Yeah. For what? Like for a Craigslist scam. So don't put your listing on Craigslist, I guess is the message, right? That should be the button that you flash out there. 2024. Is anybody even putting their listing on Craigslist anymore?
I didn't even know somebody told me they found something on Craigslist the other day, and I legitimately was shocked. I didn't even know. I
thought you sold old furniture you couldn't give away, like the free section.
Yeah.
I thought that's literally where you put it to like,
Yeah. I figured everybody was using like Facebook Marketplace or something. That's like the new Craigslist.
That's the new Craigslist. Totally.
But they were like, oh yeah, I bought it off of Craigslist. And I'm like, I wouldn't even, it wouldn't have crossed my mind to go to Craigslist anymore. But gosh, man, I really hope they got whoever that guy was.
I hope so too. Cause I was like, man, what a slouch for preying on this single mom and then like just leaving her in the shuffle. Like, and in her world, she was like so happy. She got such below market rent. She thought they were doing her a favor. The list goes on. So it was like heartbreaking. But the moral of that was like, we're able to help her like get into something else. And that property did end up selling. So it was good at the end of the day, but it beyond the sale was like, I think that's what we do as real estate agents that are hard to quantify to a world that looks like selling Sunset is so easy. And we realize, and you see it every day in the real estate attorney world and like sometimes the worst possible problems, getting those questions like, okay, how to get this far?
Yes. Yes.
Probably ask yourself that a lot.
Yeah. I can't talk details, but I had a situation like that this week where there was a property without access for 80 years and money had been lent against it. And like, how? So yeah, it's, we see it all the time.
Yeah, you see it all the time. You're like, why do I have to see it all the
time? So I was going to see if you, I know one thing that I want to talk to you about, and we talked before this, so I know your question for the attorney kind of ties into this. So, the settlement, it's on everybody's minds.
Yep.
And knowing you and knowing the kind of the outlook you have on this business, I'm really interested to hear your take on it. And then also, like, if you have any legal questions about it, maybe we could talk about those. Totally. So if you will share with me, you mentioned when you walked in that you're excited. I don't hear that a lot in connection with the settlement. People are calling me with a lot of fear, and I'm trying to alleviate that as much as I can. But again, real estate attorney, not real estate professional. And you have that other perspective on it. So why are you excited?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm excited because with change, there's also opportunity. And I think if you look at it if you take the position of there's enough business for everyone, and there's going to be 10% of people that are going to be fixated on price, and they're going to be looking at like the convenience of it and willing to offset. That's where the other firms out there that you will buy it for cash, will buy ugly houses, or will make it easy for you, and the cost is lower than what you can get from the market. Those aren't going away. In fact, they're probably going to thrive. There's going to be 10 to maybe even 15, 20% of people that I'm not going to be able to resonate with.
Yeah.
And then there's the other extreme that there's something called a Veblen good in economics where people pay more for a perceived value. So hence why you go to Mercedes-Benz or a certain type of brand and you're like, I'll pay more for that because that's a perceived value. And so you have people on two extremes. One that's not willing to pay for anything and want it done, as quick as possible. You have other people that are willing to pay for it. So as long as it's a great experience. And I think leaning into that, particularly in the upper end, the luxury space, like that is going to be a world where like more value and articulating your value becomes more prevailing. And then you have the mainstream where I'm going to call it 80% of people, 70, 80% of people have no idea what's happening. And there's always a need for someone to walk them through a complex situation.
Yeah.
Hence why real estate attorneys are there in the state of North Carolina. You walk people through like point A to point B, and you get them across the finish line. There's so much legalities and nuance that I could see a world where there's a certain number of people that unrepresented clients that maybe don't have the means, which is the unfortunate fallback of this. And there might be some things coming out down the pipe that may alleviate that, but there would be a certain segment of the population that I have an immense heart for. The first-time home buyers, the VA buyers, FHA buyers. If there's no rules in place to help them to not only like get into a home, I think that's what's going to be challenging. But for most people in the bucket of 70, 80%, they're going to need someone to walk them through a complex situation from start to finish. And the truth is, I don't think the attorneys want to be doing that.
No.
So be clear, right? Like in this world, like you're saying, I do not want to go to inspections. I do not want to negotiate thermal seal. I do not want to like go through this process. I'm here to advise, consult, and get you to a point. But how did it get this far? You're hoping that comes to you where it's like, it's just point A to point B.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even now, before the settlement is taking effect, the number of times we tell clients, hey, this is within the scope of what your agent does, because we don't want to step on toes. One, you brought the client to us in the first place. We're not going to step in and try to snag that primary relationship. We want to keep helping you build that relationship, but also it's not a thing that we do. They'll call us and say, well, due diligence is about to be up and we got the inspection report. You know who the best person to talk to this about? It's your agent. We need to get your agent on the phone, talk to them about your strategy. When we're talking about strategy of buying and selling houses, if we're talking about negotiating prices, repairs, getting vendors, like trusted vendors in place, all of that is outside the scope of what a North Carolina real estate attorney is going to do. Where our primary function is to make sure a buyer gets clear title to the property. And title has nothing to do with the condition, Title has nothing to do with the price. It has to do with, are there encumbrances? And if so, how do we get those cleared away? And if there are encumbrances, are they permissible encumbrances? So, yes, we talk about breach of contract scenarios, all of those things that like an agent who is not a licensed attorney can't give advice about. That's where we would step in. But like, for example, our engagement letter, we have 3 pages that says, even after like, this is what it's going to cost you, what the attorney does, what the attorney does not do. Like itemized of like helping you understand, hey, if you've got a specific use that you want to use for this property, then you got to look at the restrictions and make sure you're allowed to do that. That's something that like you and your agent are going to talk about. And, like having those itemized lists is not going to change once the settlement is in effect. We're not going to suddenly be like, yeah, now we'll do that. And, one of the things that we kind of alluded to before we press record is that the attorney payment structure, at least for a closing, is flat fee for most places. But when you start talking about legal advice outside of the scope of that flat fee structure, you're looking at an hourly charge like any other attorney. So, you pick up the phone to call us for advice on negotiating your repairs, the time starts ticking. And it's not something partially because that's not something real estate attorneys really want to be doing. So if it's going to take that much time away from the things that we want to be doing, then it's going to be a cost and not going to be insignificant. And I just don't think that's something buyers want to be doing is paying an attorney by the hour for something that an agent is better suited to do anyway.
That's a great point. I love your perspective on that because I think there's a certain element of unrepresented buyers thinking just like for sale by owners have been around forever, and that is not going to change either. That's that 10-20% of people we were talking about. There's also a certain number of camp that don't have the means, don't understand, or just their preference. And I can go directly to the listing agent. I could work it out, be in a dual agency situation, and then I can go to the real estate attorney of my choice, and they'll help me through it.
Yep.
That is kind of fallible thinking and a huge liability.
Yeah.
So that type, I could see that not necessarily changing your process, but there's our engagement letter. This is what we do. This is what we do not do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's, it's kind of unfortunate because we already, like you said, we already have unrepresented buyers. So they'll come to us with a contract they've written on, they've typed out in Word.
Like a napkin.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, sometimes they'll come to us with a piece of paper that they've each written on and they come and sign it in front of us because they think that's what makes it a contract is they signed it in our office. And then come to find out, we're looking at it and we're like, this isn't even binding. You've written some words on a page, but it doesn't have the elements of a contract. So, that's when they're like, okay, well, you guys write up the contract. Okay, that's going to be this much, that's what this costs. Yeah. And that's one thing that the benefit of the current structure with agents is that the client doesn't have to think about every single step and what it costs.
That's a great
and they're not
point.
having to pay at every stage either. Okay, you come to me and you want a contract drafted. You're paying for that contract being drafted because I've done the work. Right. Whether you close or not, we get paid for that. If you decide you want a title search done before you're ever under contract, we've done the work, so we're going to get paid for that.
Totally.
And it has nothing to do with whether you close. So you're spending money whether you close or not, and the commission structure is the opposite of that. You're paying when you close.
Totally.
Even though you've earned the commission, you have the right to get it even if you don't close. But, just the way that it works out most of the time is.
I love that your perspective on that too, of how the current structure has already benefited the consumer, but they don't realize it because they're not thinking about what would the alternative universe be where everything's a fee and everything feels nickel and dimed. And it's not, it's that there's inherent value in what's been built over a long time period. And the current structure certainly has some flaws. And ultimately, I think the lawsuit kind of exposed that.
And I think it's fair to say that it would be kind of disillusioned, or we'd be a little bit crazy to not acknowledge that there are some things that could be better.
Do better. Yeah. And the idea, the whole premise was that you have to pay, another agent. If you think about it, when we sit down with a seller's agent or as a seller's agent and we're asking them, this is what our fee is. That's the thing that changes on the listing side, if anything, is instead of X, which has always been negotiable, that's always been that way, we've always positioned it, we also bring in so much value that it's up to the consumer to make that choice. And I think that's what we're talking about is consumerism, to make a choice. And instead of bundling it together that it has to be this way.
Yeah.
And there's no traditional way to approach it. And that's what I think the premise of it was.
Right.
And so now it's now we really are saying that on the listing side, this is my fee, this is what I'm willing to work for. And anything over that, you can technically not offer anything to the other side, but the likelihood of offering no incentive to the other side is totally your choice on a percentage basis on what you feel comfortable with.
It's just like deciding what you want to price your house. Your agent could tell you what the comps are, and you say, I'm still going to list it for $150,000 more. And you're a fiduciary. You'll say, okay, I wouldn't do that. And I think it's going to make your house sit for 8 months longer than it should, but we will. And then it plays out. So same thing. You don't want to offer anything to the other side. That is your choice.
Totally.
It may mean that your house sits longer. We don't know. But if it does, it does. It
does, totally. And there's a new model where I think there'll be a testing out period where people are still trying to figure it out. It doesn't go into effect until the summer. So I think there's all this like conversation right now. And the truth is like it functions much how commercial real estate's been operating for a long time. You call the other agent, you have dialogue. And here's an interesting thought. In North Carolina, the exclusive buyer agency has 2 sections for compensation. One is a percentage. The other one is a retainer, right? You can write in what that says, like, okay, this to be paid at closing, with a successful transaction. But you also have a retainer that's been in there for a long time. Much how great real estate attorneys have for anything outside of the scope of the flat fee structure, it's a retainer basis paid up front and then credited back at closing. But the truth is, as agents, we don't want to take time away from our family, our teams, for things that people that give us energy, that value our services, to spend time with the 10% that don't. Like if you don't see the value in that, then I'm not going to try to convince you that you should. Right. Ultimately, that's your decision.
This one transaction is not going to change your mind.
We don't live and die on a deal.
Yeah.
We don't. We're fortunate enough that we've built up a successful practice over many years, and our team has got a great thing going in the sense that we try to attract people based on referral and repeat clients. And that's different than the online world that we've been exposed to, the Pop-Tart, I hit a button and something happens. And so I think it's a model differentiation where if you go deep on value and now it's time to level up, the professional is going to come out on top.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Yep. And that's something Ryan and I have been talking about privately, is that, some of the people that maybe saw the boom in 2020 and 2021 and said, I'm going to get into this, and then were immediately faced with struggle. They finally passed their test, and then the market's not what it was.
Right.
They may decide it's not for them anymore. Some of them, hopefully, there were some good ones that came out of it, so hopefully the good ones stick through it. But it's going to be extremely critical for agents being confident enough to explain their value. Totally. And I think that's some of why buyers might get disillusioned now, is they don't understand all of the little things that go into it. If you were to do a time study of yourself, of all the time you put into a transaction on the buyer side and the listing side, and you presented it to your client during the transaction, then I bet a lot of clients might feel like that's all I had to pay. That's the kind of value we try to think of at the law firm, and that, Ryan with his clients tries to set forth is I want them feeling like that's all. They probably could have charged us more,
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. And I think that most buyers agents do put in that work already. It's just not transparent.
I completely agree. The transparency is the big piece. And doing a buyer consult on the front end is now a requirement. When we did it was optional. I think now it's you have, before you ever step foot into a home that you don't know, you have buyer agency in place.
Yep.
You have conversation. It was always supposed to be there, by the way. The Work and Real Estate brochure was inherently built upon this. I think in North Carolina, out of many other states, is really maybe a little further ahead in this discussion, based on the contracts that are in place, based on the setup, that things are different. But having the value explained up front and sharing with them that there might be a situation where there is no compensation involved, and we'll share with you. And then it's your discretion whether or not you want to pay our fee or pass on the house. If you really want this house, for us to be involved, this is how much it's going to be. Much like when you said is outside of our scope and this is what the cost is. I mean, it's ultimately
you can choose to do that or
not. Right. Yeah. So you have choices, but I think that's a piece of having full transparent conversation on the front end versus we've been, our hair is on fire since COVID. In a lot of ways in those first year or so coming out of COVID was it was so busy. And so you're running around. It's a really interesting perspective now that things are more of a moderate pace. Oh, you mean I don't sell my home in 1 hour?
Yeah.
We are seeing rumblings of that as the time of this filming. We're seeing though it kind of come back because I think people are taking a deep breath. Interest rates are what they are. There's conversation of them going back down. And so just that opportunity alone, and it's warm outside. Yeah. Here we are at the lake. You guys are in a great location too.
Yeah, we are. I mean, that's one of the benefits. And also it kind of clouds your thinking a little bit because we're in such a great market. There's a ton of activity. So even though from a real estate attorney's perspective, because we do refinances as well, those went away completely. So it changed our business model quite a bit. But the real estate portion of it, the purchases, have stayed pretty hot around here. Totally. It's hard not to, like when I drive to work every day over the lake, and
it's just like the sun's, like beaming down to this beautiful water.
We can literally hear the birds tweeting right now.
I kind of hear them.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel serenity right here.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
So like, I'm curious too with your team, because, you guys aren't small and you've got a lot of people that look to you for guidance. What's your message to them right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think being diligent of like your own capabilities, looking inward, and then first realizing comparison is a thief of joy. Like start with, there's not so much in our world of work-life balance. It's like work-life symphony. Like you're trying to orchestrate like great music where if one key's off, you realize it somewhere else, and you have to kind of like make it all gel together. Yeah. And so look at your life and start with why I'm doing what I'm doing, and really digging deep on what's made you successful in the past might work today, but you have to be open-minded to maybe doing things a little bit different. And that may feel like challenging to really like examine that, to say, well, I've been doing it this way for so long. And the agents on our team that are grasping this is a new era, there's opportunity on the horizon. We might have to say things a little bit different, might have to do things a little bit different. But in the end, we're there to protect the consumer.
Yes.
Like our clients as a good fiduciary is for their benefit.
Yeah.
And if I really believe that and I bring the value, not much is really going to change from that perspective. And the last thing I would say is, really think about the best people in your orbit that give you energy, that really value you as a human being. And we have a gratitude jar where someone's things we're grateful for on the outbound, but also the inbound, the handwritten notes, the people that have said, wow, what an incredible job you've done. Thank you so much for everything you did. When you stayed up late and you were at our house talking about a market value and the trends, just want to say thank you for that extra touch. We got the baby blanket engraved with our son's name that just arrived in this world. All those little things that aren't so little, they're really meaningful for creating, I think, a magical experience in this lifetime. Like if you really go back in that gratitude jar and you pull out a couple of those handwritten notes and you say, this is why I do what I do. And I want more people like that value me as a human, that say I'm here for their benefit. And if I'm here to serve, I think it'll work itself out for the long term. So reminding yourself of those things in the daily, and then just dig in the activities. Like if you get outside your own mind and get into a mind share where there's other successful people doing it, and the best agents right now aren't listening to the noise, they're leaning into action. They're not clouded by what they see and the fear. They're leaning into excitement. And even changing your body structure of, if I'm sitting when I feel fearful, standing up and grounding yourself, going outside, getting into sunshine and just being around this beautiful earth and being grateful for that moment in that space. A lot of things can change just with it starts with a mindset.
Yeah. I'm hung on, I love everything that you said, but I'm really hung on what you said is, if we keep our minds wrapped around that we're here to serve. And I know it's taught in the classes, like what a fiduciary means and how it really means you have to put the client's interest above your own. And it should mean that the profession self-selects for people that are willing to do that. That's not always the case, but really going back to like the whole purpose of the lawsuit was I think we do it pretty good here in North Carolina. And like you said, we're ahead on some of these things so that the changes aren't so much changes for us, but some of the other states don't have these things in place. So it's going to be a big change for them. But again, the role is intended to help the consumer and put their interests above your own and help them achieve their result. And also when you talk about serving, I think that exudes in what you do as a person. And I also think back on my own business relationships and friendships, and some of my most fruitful relationships have come out of service.
Oh, totally.
I was on the Best of Lake Norman podcast, and the host Jeff asked me, what's your best favorite networking thing? And I was like, well, honestly, it's not any of the groups. It's the service organizations. I serve on Hope of Mooresville's board, or we built a habitat house, and all of those things, aside from doing something that gave back to our community, unintentionally led to business relationships that grew our business. And he he was like, oh yeah, I kind of like that. And I feel like you're kind of the same way of like, you're giving into your community just to give, but it kind of is coming back around in your business and, you know, how you're able to grow it.
Totally. I'll give you one quick story on that example on a small scale. I used to be part of Rotary. Unfortunately, 4 kids. I haven't been as involved.
But kind of tough.
It's kind of tough to make some of the meetings, but there's a saying, service above self. And so I really love that, to your point. And I remember in our neighborhood, we were lacking like park benches around a pond. That's where I used to live.
Okay.
And I remember thinking like, you know, we really could use just some park benches there. Like we've done a lot of work in this community. Like, how about we just like kind of pay for it and then we don't look for anything in return? Like, and that's the message of like, I'm just here to serve.
Yeah.
And I notice a need. I found a need and I want to fill it. And so we had these park benches installed and they were asking like, wow, that's so generous of you. How about you put your name or like something on there inscribed, you know, thank you so much. And I thought about it for a minute because it crossed my mind like, oh, could this lead to future business? But then I said, why did I do this to begin with? I appreciated the question because that means they want to acknowledge the generosity of giving to that community. But I think you do it because you don't want anything in return.
Right.
And that premise of like who you are innately is just to give and then it comes back in droves. The amount of business that we did end up doing because I decided not to put my name on it because I didn't want to be associated with that at all. People found out about it and they had this undercurrent of conversation that I didn't even know was existent. And it was amazing the amount of people that did say something and recognize that. But I think the message is that if you come from a place of service above self and you're there to put the park benches in places that need it without any expectation of getting something out of it, like that comes from the right place.
Yeah.
And the best organization, 1,000% agree, are those that I've connected with great people, great human beings. They're kind-hearted, they're generous, they're incredible humans, and they're giving back for the right reasons. Man, I can really get behind that. And like, that's who I want to hang out with.
Yeah.
So let's go build a house together.
I know,
that'd be kind of
right?
fun now that you said it.
Well, and we did that in 2018. My law partner, before he passed, he was very involved with Habitat. That's where he met his wife, you know, at one of the Habitat meetings. That. Yeah. So their whole marriage was built around service. And in 2018, he decided it had been a goal of his to build a Habitat house, like be able to fund it and provide all of the labor. So for 13 weekends, I think it was, we were out there, you know, every weekend building this house. And in fact, we had so many volunteers, we ended up being able to build 2. So the one that we funded, but then also another project down the street. And he didn't want it to be the house that Ben Thomas built. He wanted to be the house that the real estate community built. So every weekend we would have different real estate groups come out with us for like their team building. And we would get the chance to like swing hammers alongside them and get to know their stories as people outside of just what we hear in the closing table. And just the relationships that were built out of that, like even people that aren't even in real estate anymore, you know, but we were able to remain close with them because of that experience.
So cool.
Yeah, let's build a house.
Let's build a house. I think we should do that next. You know, you've heard of the Realtors Care Day project. It's been around. So Realtors Care Day is the Canopy Housing Association, our local realtor association. Almost 15 years ago, started this initiative where we're going to help people. It's a cross firm, has nothing to do with your firm. Don't want that on there.
Yeah.
Literally make it about one brand of just realtors, care, and one day.
Yeah.
And that was literally, we got together in this particular year, it's April 19th. And so realtors have already kind of missed the deadline of signing up, but every year it goes on and we come together. This particular year, I'm in charge of the special projects where there's in Mooresville, or in Statesville rather, there is a housing shelter in like within Statesville, and they have 2 group homes within that that they've built or own for one's all boys, one's all girls. And literally organizations come in and help these like, you know, kids in their housing and paint rooms, build decks, do what have you. And so this particular year, we're jumping in to paint several rooms, do several needed repairs. And it feels good to have like a group where it's not about your firm or my firm. It's not about me as an individual or you as an individual. It's like, what can you do as one unit giving back for the greater good? And can you do it all in one day? And Habitat has this message that's been going forever. I love that. And the Realtors Care Day project in 15 years, I think there's something like 100, and don't quote me on this, but something like $150,000 impact in the community.
That's awesome.
With the volunteer hours, something like 300,000 plus. So I think that idea of service above self and really leaning into what gives you energy, like we're going to forge ahead and be better than ever.
Yeah. The specific project that you're working on and in charge of, the group that I'm involved with, Hope of Mooresville, is for right now for women and children that are unhoused. And there's a group that comes in and they'll do things like paint. They'll help with maintenance on the houses. And I know you probably know this, but I can't let the opportunity pass by without saying how much of a difference you're going to make for these boys and girls doing this project. Because the staff that works there, I don't even know what organization it is, but I can tell you they are tired and they're stressed and they care so much about these kids that just the load that you're going to take off of them in that one day, it's really going to change the feeling in the home for the kids and for the staff. So I'll say thank you on their behalf in advance. Like
absolutely.
Like that's awesome that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, it feels good to get back.
That's like, I'm trying not to get emotional. I'm not really like a super emotional person, but I think about the children and I'm like, oh,
I know, it gets me. I know. And to be a mom and a parent, right? Like, you see yourself and your kids and you want the best for them for the future. And then you see like kids that have gone through some challenges and they're so innocent, you want to give them this life. Yes. And I think that's the organizations that really do that well. They're setting these kids up for success in the future. And it's really, it's a passion project that you see come to life and means a lot to see them succeed and thrive. So, yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you're doing it. And I'm glad that you're the one in charge because even just talking to you right now, I'm feeling inspired, and I like being around people that I come away from a conversation like, I'm ready. Let's go attack this.
Totally.
So I'm a little jealous of your team right now because they get access to you all the time. Right. So I before we close it up, I want to make sure I don't forget the segment that Ryan really likes.
Yes, let's not forget Ryan's.
He would fuss at me, and it's a really great idea too because it's he calls it the tactical toolbox, and it's where we look at different tips or tricks or like things big and small that maybe you use in your day to day that help you do your job better. So do you have anything like that you could share with the group?
I love that. By the way, we can do this anytime. So we can do a repeat of this. Good. Yeah, totally. And we'll talk about how that project went and maybe more to come.
Yeah.
The tactical toolbox, great addition to the podcast. Love that segment. I think getting tactile, we're thinking about things that will help an agent's business for the future and is something that maybe they hadn't thought of. Our team and I were huge on client events. We love it. We do the Panthers tailgate. We do movie events. I love Star Wars.
I've been to the movie event and it was amazing.
I had a lot of fun, right? The force was with you, I have to tell you. Yeah. This is good stuff. So between all the different events that we do, one of the things we found was that Eventbrite, certainly a great app, it builds community, Facebook invites online, and they got to have the social component. But we found that one of the best ways to connect with our people is via text. And there's an app called Hit 'em Up. Hit 'em Up is a relatively inexpensive app, but you can load your database, sort and organize them. And you may not do all the events the same. Like you may do a small intimate dinner for your top A+, and you've got a segment, like there's 20 people, or you create a Porsche driving experience for the really like this amazing experience. You only want a certain number of people.
Yeah.
You're not going to broadcast the same way. So it allows you to send a text to each group like that you designate. And then ultimately it doesn't send it all at once. What it does is it pulls up your text interface and allows you to customize each message. Okay. But you can add things like, hi, Tiffany /name. And here's your message. And then has your signature. So the hi name and the signature might be the same, but the customized message you would create, hit a button. And then you have, let's call it 200 text messages lined up in the queue that basically you hit accept each time and it will send one by one. So there's no such thing as text blasting. But you could do it in a way that's organized and customized to your database with a message. So for events, it's been really helpful because I think the event is great because you have interface, but you also, for those that miss the actual event, you're showing them on how special they are by just simply reconnecting with them. Wow, I was thought of. I feel special and I feel personally communicated with. Yeah. So you can do that with a lot of different ways, but Hit 'em Up is one app that we use.
I really like that because like you said, it's not just a robotic blast. There has to be an element of intent to it. Yeah. And that is really the thing that makes somebody feel special is that, I wasn't just a button pressed. Someone took their time to compose this message to me and they want me there. So
totally.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Hi, name. It was great to see you last week at lunch. Message. But it speeds up 80% of the process. So it customizes it for sure.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And again, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
My pleasure.
Will you please tell everybody how they can find you?
Sure. Absolutely. So here in Charlotte, Lake Norman area, we're also in Asheville with our team, and at mikeheggie.realtor. That's my handle on IG, probably the best way to find me if you're looking for crazy stories or, interesting reels.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.